My name is Sam. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager here at Fairygodboss. And Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women. Our mission is to improve the workplace by increasing transparency, and we offer a variety of free resources like anonymous company reviews, job listings, articles, virtual recruiting events, and so much more to help you succeed throughout your career. We will be recording today's session, so if you miss anything or you want to rewatch this back, maybe share it with a friend, you will have the ability to do so, and we'll email you the recording by the end of the day today. We're also going to try and answer some audience questions at the end of today's conversation. You'll find the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to leave your questions there, and you can leave them as yourself or anonymously. So don't be afraid to ask whatever comes to mind. We have an incredible lineup of panelists here for you today, set to have a really great conversation. I'm very excited about it. And moderating today's conversation is Courtney Conley, careers reporter at CNBC. So with that, Courtney, I'm gonna pass it right over to you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Sam, for that introduction. And thank you so much to everyone who has tuned in. We are in for an amazing, dynamic, timely conversation with some amazing women such as Sherry Sims from the Black Career Women's Network, Raw Goddess from Information, Chloe Barzy from Accenture, and the amazing writer and speaker, Marina Ferguson. Welcome, ladies, and thank you so much for being here. Before we get started and fully dive into today's conversation, I would love for each of you all just to go around and tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what are you working on personally, professionally, and then what gets you excited in the morning, especially during these crazy times? So Chloe, I'll start with you.
Hello, everyone, and it's nice to see Atlanta in the house. So I love those shout outs. I'm here in Atlanta. My name is Chloe Barzy. I'm a wife, a mom of 3 children, ages 20, 13, and 11. And I just found out I'm a 9-year breast cancer survivor, so I'm excited about that. I have the privilege to lead Accenture's Atlanta office, which has lots of ethnic diversity and the most Black leaders, I believe, in our firm in this one office. What gets me excited every day is the platform that I have to make a positive impact for our clients, our over 2,000 people, and the ability to partner with our clients and community leaders to make a positive impact in the Atlanta community.
Sorry, I was muted. Awesome. Ra, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Absolutely. Good morning, you all. And it's just such an honor and a joy to be here. So my name is Raw Goddess, and I'm what's known as an entrepreneurial soul coach. I work with leaders and change makers from various industries, helping them really align their values, their purpose, and their principle with the strategic objectives that they've been called to lead and deliver on behalf of their corporations or entrepreneurial endeavors. I'm also the co-founder and co-CEO of Information, woo woo, which is the first safe space app and brave space community devoted to women of color leaders and executives. And it's my joy to be here. And what's exciting me most is we're in conversations right now with our founding member community and really sort of talking about the vision for this community and what we want to create as women, both individually and in the context of our careers, but also collectively in the world. And these women are just blowing me away. So I'm really, really excited to be in these conversations, and that is definitely getting me up every morning.
Awesome, amazing. Sherry, would you like to go next?
You're on mute. I was on mute too. My name is Sherry Sims. I am the founder of Black Career Women's Network. We are the longest, or should I say the oldest organization that supports the professional development of Black women. Our organization, we do various things in terms of coaching, mentoring. We host webinars. We also have a podcast, and we also have a community. Our goal, again, is really to bridge the gap of professional development and mentor access for Black women in the workplace. I'm also an HR professional, been in the business now for about 21 years, talent acquisition, and also in for diversity and inclusion, and which is very important to me for both in terms of being able to make sure that we as Black women have a seat at the table. So glad to be here.
Awesome. And last but certainly not least, Irena.
Hi, my name is Marina Ferguson, and I'm a mom, a wife, a writer. I have 4 girls, 2, 4, 6. No, I'm not counting, and 21. And I'm a TEDx curator. I curated 4 TEDx events over the past 3 years, starting with the one after I gave my own TEDx talk while 8 months pregnant with my now 2-year-old. I was able to do that. And Fairygodboss has been, I have to give them a shout out. They've been a phenomenal resource, but also a platform for me to tell my story from my TEDx that went wrong, for me curating TEDx events, and for me actually going back to work full time for a digital marketing firm after 10 years because of an article that I wrote on Fairygodboss. So I must give them a shout out and say, use their platform, connect with them. Use everything you have to cultivate your dreams. And so I'm currently working on a number of projects, but TEDx Studio is my next project. And I'm excited to finish up my nano degree in UX design through Udacity. My backstory is that I have a special needs daughter that is 21, but I had her when I was 20, and I completed 3 academic degrees, including one from Yale, while raising her on my own before marrying my husband and having this trifectory of 2, 4, 6 triplets almost, because they look alike. So I'm so excited to be here. Fairygodboss, thank you for having us. And I really implore you to use the platform, connect with women. I think it is the up and coming and already almost there version of women's version of LinkedIn. So be very, very connected to them. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And thank you so much, ladies, for that introduction. I'm excited about today's conversation. I mean, honestly, excitement is an understatement. I think when we think about the workplace and the challenges that Black women face, it's very unique. And they're challenges that really only we can speak to from experience, that only we can offer advice to. And so I really want this to be a safe space for us to really delve deep into what those challenges are and what some of the solutions are, and also speak about some of you all's personal experiences as executives, as entrepreneurs. And so with this question, I'd love to start with you first, Sherry. What's one very specific challenge that you think Black women face when they're trying to find their footing in their career and in their life? And how did you face it, and how did you succeed?
I think for me, one of the biggest challenges I had was learning how to become politically savvy. That was one of the things that I think helped me back in certain ways, is not understanding how to navigate the politics in the workplace, and being able to kind of find my place of being able to show my authentic self, or show up and be with professional presence and having a strong communication style. So for me, I learned a lesson early on in my career, my very first leadership role. I didn't do the work prior to. I wanted to be a leader, and I wanted to manage a team, but I really did not have the proper training to really learn how to sustain that. Now, was I a good leader in terms of performance? Absolutely. But where I failed was learning how to play the game and be politically savvy and building relationships and in all of those things. So I think because a lot of Black women do not want to do that. They don't want it. They don't want to, play the game. They don't want to be politically savvy. They want to go to work, do a good job, and go home, or at least some of us do. And I think that it's important to understand that being politically savvy in the workplace is also one element of other things that you need to be successful. And so that, for me, that's where I learned a hefty lesson with that. And then eventually, picked it up and still wanted to be able to really show up in a way that was still authentic to my personal values, right? Or my values in the workplace, not so much to where I would sell my soul. So that was not, so I think sometimes we have this preconception that we have to be this cutthroat person, or be very shrewd, or what have you, in order to be politically savvy. And that's not necessarily the case. Now, you will have some toxic people around you, of course, that may play those games, but there still is a way to finesse it and navigate through that workplace and be politically savvy and be successful and move forward.
I think that you made so many amazing points, but definitely being political savvy, that's something that I know starting out in my career, it was like, what, do what, and how, and what does that look like? So I know that a lot of people, me personally, can relate to that.
Oh, I lost a job behind it. I mean, my boss flew in from another city and said, it's not working out. And I was like, well, what am I doing? I'm number 2 in the region. What have I done? Why am I not working out, and he would never tell me. It took me 6 months to realize in my new role. It just kind of hit me one day when I went to work, and I was like, this is why I lost another job, because I was not playing. I just was not, I wasn't following the hidden workplace rules. I wasn't following the norms. I was just coming in and doing it my way and was like, screw everybody else. I'm going to be number one in the region, and I don't care who likes it. And I wasn't thinking about how the game was played and how I could fit myself into, like, weave myself into that. And that cost me big, but it was a good lesson for me, because then I was aware of that, and I started working on how to learn how to build relationships the right way and play the game. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah, it's definitely a game, and every workplace is different. And so you just have to figure out how to navigate whatever that landscape looks like. And Chloe, I want to go to you next. What's one very specific challenge you faced as a Black woman in the workplace? How did you face it, and how did you succeed?
It's very similar to what Sherry said, is that I would, looking back on it now, I would call it the inner dialogue that I had in my mind. So in my mind, I was, I had to be the best. I had to be smarter. I had to work harder. Everything was based on my performance. And, when you have that inner dialogue, and on top of that, the feeling that my success really would other people, if I can be successful, then I can open the door for others behind me. And that was always something that I had in my mind. And in thinking like that, there was a lot of pressure that I put on myself. In addition to that, I had my work persona, and then I had my after work persona. So at work, I was in there to work hard. And as Sherry said, sometimes I would follow other norms. So I was looking around for, what is a model of leadership, and what does a leader look like? And it wasn't always the kind of leader that I wanted to be. And so it took me a while, and through mentoring, through sponsorship, through coaching, I really got a chance to kind of break it down and learn, as Sherry said, more of the rules of the game. So, and it's really a combination of performance, image, and exposure. And I learned that from one of my mentors. And so performance is just a baseline, and that gets you into the game. Without performance, you won't even be in the game. And so that performance is something that has to be consistent, and you have to continue. But then there's more. And the more is really thinking about your image. And image is not just what you look like, but it's how you show up. Are you excited to be at work? Are you pleasant? Do people want to be around you and work with you? And all of that's important. And so to be able to develop that image, you've got to really, and I know Ra would think about this, but you got to really think about it internally. And you have to stop that dialogue in your mind that's saying, am I good enough? And start saying, I'm good enough and I can do this. Yeah. And in fact, what I do, my personal method is I'm a Christian, and I say every morning when I get up, I can do all things, and that's all things through Christ who strengthens me. And that gives me that strength to continue through hard times. And then the third thing, so performance, image, the last thing is exposure. And that's really developing those relationships that help you in your career. And what I thought I had to do was, I didn't learn how to do any of that. I was so focused on performance. So the image and exposure pieces are the things I learned later. And I would just finally just close out with saying that exposure can be real. It doesn't have to be something that you have to force. It's really just getting to know more people and finding out things that you have in common with those people, and you'll find you'll get more supporters than you think.
Awesome. I love those 3 points: performance, image, and exposure. And I think, Chloe, you made a very interesting point when you spoke about how sometimes we get in our heads and we have these thoughts of like, am I good enough? And really it's something that we all deal with just in terms of imposter syndrome. And I think for a lot of Black women, often we enter spaces where we're the only or one of very few, especially, considering what industry we may be entering in or what level you're being elevated to in your career. And I think oftentimes that goes back to us facing issues with showing up as our authentic self in the workplace. I know even not too long ago, Roz Bureau, who, as we know, in March, she'll be the only woman leading a Fortune 500 company when she joins Walgreens. But she spoke about how oftentimes when you get to certain places in your career, people don't expect you to be there. And she says oftentimes she's been mistaken for something completely different than the CEO. And so I think a lot of times being that only or one of very few presents a lot of challenges. And so I want to go to you, arena. Have you experienced this challenge of being the only or one of very few in a workspace? And then how did you get over it? And how did you grow to learn to bring your professional self, bring your full self to the workplace or in any professional setting?
No, thank you so much for that. I went to, K to 12. I had a foundation of being in private school settings with that were all Black. And so I think that based in that foundation, along with my dad and his amazing professional career, like he's just phenomenal. He's really an inspiration in terms of how he's navigated corporate America for really the last 40 years, from the time he was climbing poles for AT&T to him being at Amazon and being recruited by Amazon and Sony Corp in his mid 60s. He was even actually recruited by Facebook as well, reaching out to him for emergency management roles. I've watched him strategically. That, along with that foundation, helped me to navigate predominantly white institutions, including Boston College and Yale as a single mom. And so that prepared me for the workplace, any workplace, where I could be the only, but show up confident, look people in the eye, be deliberate, be kind, be focused, but be confident. And when you look someone in the eye, they have no choice but to also come to that level or not. It's the East Coast thing for me. I think being bred there for my graduate studies, being in Brooklyn during the Brooklyn Renaissance of 03 to 2007 kind of helped me as well, being in that neighborhood of Stuyvesant Heights and just having that strong foundation of knowing who I was and seeing other women of color, the editor of Essence down the street, even Chad Bossman, rest in peace, was one of our peers in the neighborhood. So I think that strong foundation helped that I can go into any predominantly white space and not feel like I'm clouded around. I want all children, women, men of color to feel that level of confidence. And if you don't have it, channel it. Because that's it. That's really what it boils down to. So I say all that to say that even in my last job, the one that was my dream role that I wrote about in the Fairygodboss article, and I took a pause to make sure I was concentrating on my family before the summertime as the kids are remote learning. And we are still very much in a semi-lockdown here in Los Angeles because of our numbers. And so making sure I was focused in on family and my husband's role. He's also in emergency management and supporting him. But while I was in that role, being one of few Black women, I didn't naturally completely gravitate towards I gravitated, and we knew we had a thing with the other women of color. It was only two others, but we were so different, but also still bonded. So I still was alone and we're remote, right? And so I knew that I had to set the stage first. And one quick example is they put me on the diversity committee without asking me. And I watched that. I picked that level of like, this is how you're telling me to show up. But when I went to the first meeting, it wasn't what I thought it was. They had a Black Lives Matter sign that, of course, I know Black Lives Matter. I'm a Black woman every day, like Condoleezza Rice said. And I wake up every day, I'm a Black woman. All that encompasses. But I did not really feel like, from a brand standpoint, strategically as a company, with the type of company they were, that should have been their thing out the gate. They were 7 months late to the party, and I saw that they were using me. So I said, I don't want to really be a part of this in diversity committee, and I'm okay with that. And I had to make a bold decision in a kind and thoughtful way to position myself professionally and not as the token. So I'm sure we'll get more onto that, but I just wanted to put that out there. Authentic self truly means authentic self. And I knew what I was there to do professionally, and I did that and I nailed it. And I feel like it's important to show up and still have a level of, you don't have to go along with everything that everyone else says. You have to position yourself a certain way. So that's just an example.
Awesome. And I think that's so important what you said, positioning yourself as a professional, not just as the token. I think that's super important. And sometimes that's a very hard line to balance. And Ra, I want to go to you next. Have you experienced this challenge of being the only or one of very few in a workspace? And if you have, how did you do it? How did you get over it? And how did you learn to bring your full self to work?
I mean, I so appreciate just everything Sherry and Raina have said and Chloe have said. I mean, obviously the commonalities, we only need to be together 3 minutes and we already can see each other and feel each other, right, Courtney, in this conversation. And again, shout out to Fairygodboss for creating this space. I mean, Raina, I just want to say, like, absolutely, for me, it was my mother and my father. They were born in the 1920s. They survived 2 decades of Jim Crow segregation in this country. And that was my foundation. They marched with King. They knew Malcolm, so I came from this very deeply rooted commitment to our community and our people. And no matter where kind of I walked, that was definitely what I carried with me. And so that was really my foundation and what I stood on and the values that they instilled in me. And so that was for me kind of the ground level. And in my corporate career, when I began, and I left corporate many, many years ago, but when I began, I was working in the specialty chemicals industry. So I was an only. There was only one other Black woman in my company that was in our field, our industry, and there was maybe one other who was actually in our entire field. So, we just didn't see ourselves. But this commitment to values and principles and convictions, and I think that this is, to Sherry's point, I think sometimes we have to struggle with whether or not we want to play the game or what game we want to play, because some games are not for our health, are not in our best interest. And we have to make really values-based decisions, even if everybody else is doing it. You have to remember, you got to look yourself in the mirror. You got to sleep at night. You got to think about what you put your name to. And so it's really, really important to decide that, okay, is the game one I feel like I can play from a values perspective? What helped me when I decided that I wasn't going to play the game was to really honor the principles of love and compassion. So I was committed to bringing incredible value. I was committed to seeing, honoring, and respecting every single person that I worked with. I was committed to constantly looking at where I could bring more of the mission to the company to the fore. And so those were the ways in which I chose to really stand out, right? Because I think the image and exposure piece is really important. So I do want to say, ladies, it is important to think about, what do you want to be known for? So it's not just enough to be seen, but what do you want to be seen for? What do you want to be known for? And I thought about contribution very, very intentionally. The other thing that I did was the relationship building piece is really important. So not just being in the functionality of the job, but taking time to get to know if people are a single father raising 3 kids, or if people are the 3rd generation in their family to be in this industry, or because you're making then those natural connections and those authentic connections, so that when the business issues and challenges come to bear or opportunities come to bear, you have real relationships, authentic relationships that you can leverage in order to get the job done. And that was really the way that I chose to show up and succeed in the context of, of my own journey. And those are practices that I continue to work from today, because if we don't see each other's humanity, and sometimes this can be hard, y'all, it'd be easy to kind of go, that's the enemy over there. I'm not crossing that line. Y'all know what I mean. But we, at the end, beginning, middle, and end of the day, we're all human beings. And, most of us are trying to do the very best that we can with what we have. And it's like, if we can bring that compassion, if we can bring that love, we can stand on that foundation and also show love and compassion for ourselves, it creates a lot more room for the work it is that we're all here to do.
You made so many amazing points. I think one key thing was just knowing how you want to show up, and then have compassion for yourself. Because I think oftentimes, in addition to pressures that are put on us, we also sometimes internalize and put pressures on ourselves. And then, like you say, we sometimes look and think like it affects how we navigate the workplace. So thank you so much for that, Ra. Chloe, I want to jump back to you, because as an executive at Accenture, I know a lot of companies talk a lot about diversity and inclusion and their initiatives around it, and what they're doing and what they're focusing on. And I think oftentimes we see how broad diversity and inclusion initiatives often don't work for Black women, because they fail to address the intersectional challenges of racism and sexism that Black women face in the workplace. As an executive, what do you think companies need to do more of or less of to ensure that Black women have a fair chance at advancing in the workplace? Because I know that even when you look at the statistics about, like I mentioned earlier, Ross Bureau will be the only Black woman leading a Fortune 500 company. But when you go a bit below that and look at the C-suite and you look at the lack of diversity in the C-suite, and then Lean In, for example, put out a study last year where they showed that for every white man promoted to manager, 58 Black women are promoted. And so clearly there are a bit of challenges there. What do you think companies need to do more of or less of to address those?
It's a great question. And I've reflected on that a lot because of everything that's going on in society today. I mean, if you think about it, companies are a microcosm of what's happening outside of these companies. And so I don't know if we can ever totally eliminate racism or sexism, but the tone starts at the top. And so I am blessed to work for a company where our CEOs have an unwavering commitment to equality and justice for all, and they're very vocal about it. So zero tolerance for racism, bigotry, and hate of any kind is something that, you know, we're clear on. It's something that our CEO has been clear on in the marketplace, and it's been something that, you know, we know is clear within Accenture. And so going past that, because that's important first to set the tone. The next thing is if you think about it, there are things that, you know, we can do ourselves and things that we need others to help us do. So we have, you know, opportunities for training, for development, ways that we can help improve ourselves. And we always have that. But really, I think the biggest thing that, you know, companies need to do is be intentional about sponsorship and really making a seat at the table, making room, because for so long, there haven't been those opportunities. And so companies have got to, at this point, kind of make up for lost ground. And I'm thankful that I'm at a company where, you know, we see that, we're willing to do that, and we support each other in doing that. But it's hard because a lot of companies are making these pledges and these commitments, but they don't have a lot below the commitment and the pledge. And so I think the key is to not only make a commitment, but to really hold yourself accountable for those commitments. So one example that Accenture does is we publicly pledged by 2025 to increase the representation of African American and Black people from 9 to 12%. It's a increase, but we're holding ourselves accountable by making these numbers visible. They're publicly visible. And I think the more companies that are willing to be visible and measure themselves, then realize that then they have to follow through on some of these commitments and pledges. So I'm excited about what we're doing in this space, but there's always more to be done. And so it's something that we have to all take part in. It can't be just us, people of color, you know, saying that we need to be different, but it's got to be, you know, visible allies, visible mentors, and visible sponsors. And sponsors are so key. I know you'll talk about that later, but one thing I'll say is that I think there's that sponsors not only pull you up, but another thing that sponsors do, going back to my earlier conversation around networks, is sponsors really open their networks up to you. And I think that that's so important because with those networks and those abilities, we can see more about what we can achieve, and then we can get support in achieving those goals.
Awesome. And Chloe, I'm so happy that you brought up sponsorship and mentorship, and we can honestly dive right into that now. And Irena, I'd also love for you to weigh in on this, but we know how important sponsorship and mentorship is to helping all individuals advance in the workplace, but yet oftentimes Black women don't have access to sponsors and to mentors. And a lot of times we don't even know how to position ourselves to gain that access. So Chloe, do you mind just expanding on how Black women can position themselves to gain a mentor, to gain a sponsor? And also, what's the difference between the two? Because I do think there's also a lot of misconceptions about how those two differ.
Sure, happy to. So from my perspective, a mentor can be in your company or outside of your company. I actually have a number of mentors that are outside of my company because they give me additional perspective on the challenges that I face. So a mentor in my mind, just very simply put, is someone that can help kind of push you up. They can give you support, prop you up, give you suggestions, ideas, support. A sponsor is someone that is directly accountable and then can actually pull you up. So there's that kind of push, and then there's that pull. And that pull, that ability to invite you into the leadership circle, invite you into the right conversations, That's what I'm talking about when I refer to a sponsor, someone that is in that position and willing to help you. And so it's easy to get a mentor. I mean, you can ask people whether they be your mentor, and they're not, no one is putting any of their own political capital on the line to be a mentor to you. But sponsorship is different, because when someone sponsors you, they are putting their own political capital on the line to sponsor you. And so it's harder to get a sponsor. Sponsors usually happen through a history of solid performance. They happen through introductions, as I said, sponsors opening up their circle so that you can have access to other people at leadership levels. So sponsorship to me is much more intentional, and it's harder to ask for a sponsor. One of the things that I've learned, just a simple tip, is that when I meet, even when I'm on a Zoom call like this, there'll be people that I'll see that are speakers that I think are just amazing. And I may just connect with them offline or after the call and just, start building those relationships. And the more relationships I build, the more I find that a lot of leaders know each other. And so you end up building and expanding your circle. So an easy way to get a sponsor is to first start really building your mentors. And sometimes, your mentors end up being sponsors. So it's a lot easier to ask someone to be a mentor than to ask someone to be a sponsor. And once someone gets to know you, then they're more willing to sponsor you.
Awesome. And thank you so much for explaining that distinction. Marina, I'd love for you to weigh in on how can Black women position themselves to get a mentor or to get a sponsor?
No, thank you for that. Chloe did an amazing job at that. I'm going to read in the comments that someone made a clear distinction. Sponsors, I think they said that the sponsors open the door and give you the floor. And someone else said that mentors are more coaches and sponsors can be the entry point. And so just to note, from 2010 till 2020, I was a freelance writer. And I had to build my platform and my career from scratch. Though I had 2 master's degrees, I had to take everything that I had to pull together to make sure I validated myself with my content writing, portfolio and X, Y, and Z. And so in 2014, I was approached by a Black woman in tech who was, like an engineer. She was a coder, engineer, second career, and I knew that's where I wanted to be. And she was championing a campaign that I was doing around a tech project that I was excited about. And she latched onto me and said, "I believe in you." When I tell you, she became my mentor. She's the person who, through her organization, I built her first website from scratch. And she's the person who sent me to South by Southwest. She was my sponsor. She was my mentor first, then she was my sponsor. And I was able to speak at South by Southwest with my 3-month-old 3 times and hold a booth in the open floor. It was a huge opportunity, but I was also able to represent her organization well. So the biggest thing that I can say about mentorship is that sometimes you have to practice with having an invisible mentor, right? Sometimes people think that you're supposed to reach out to people and say, "Can you be my mentor?" Well, they probably get a lot of requests for that. So you first kind of study them, see how you can support them long-term, follow their path, and even decide if you want to be interviewed, if you're kind of interviewing them virtually or like through osmosis and not necessarily, because it can be overwhelming, right? So you watch them and you see them over time. I have a mentee who I've been mentoring from the time that she was a graduate student and deciding what she wanted to do to the time that she married her husband, is now on her 2nd child, and is now about to open her own chain of beauty supply stores. She said she wanted to open one. I told her I needed her to be a franchiser. I told her I needed her to save a certain amount of money. I told her how to relationally connect with this person who she's been married to for 3 years. And so I think mentorship and friendship kind of happen organically. So be okay if you don't physically have one. Don't feel like you're left out. That's the first thing. Because I only have one mentee, as many people as I know, but people are following my track. They listen, they pay attention. Yesterday, I put out something about a free masterclass for TEDx speakers on my Facebook page to people who are gonna follow it, but not ask me to be their mentor, right? So, and that wasn't a masterclass that I'm giving, but it's just an example. So I say all that to say, that's the distinction. I really just implore you to be careful sometimes, because you want to make sure their character and their value matches up with who you are. And so don't chase it so hard that you compromise that. And I want you to be safe. So that's the first thing for the mentorship. For the sponsorship, you have to study the brand, see if they go along with it. I had to be an excellent pitcher for years to pitch my freelance articles, partnerships, relationships, and I had to show improve. I had to make sure that I delivered on what I was putting out there. So I hope that helps in line of the mentorship and the sponsorship. Let it happen organically. Go back and make a spreadsheet of all the relationships you've already made, because that's important. You may be able to loop back around to them, connect with them, and see what's happening with them over time, and not just feel like you're making the ask. Maybe ask one quick question of relevance, and then that reconnects you to the person. So I hope that helps.
Definitely helps. I think, like you said, when you're thinking about mentorship and sponsorship, you have to let it happen organically. I think so many times, I know even for me, to be completely honest, early in my career, when you think like, I need a mentor, and you see somebody whose career you admire, and you meet them, and sometimes it's kind of like, they're not the person I thought they were. And you kind of have to organically go with that, because you can't force someone to be your mentor. You can't force someone to be your sponsor. So thank you so much for that, Irina. We know, in addition to mentorship and sponsorship, money, salary, negotiating is a huge part of how you navigate the workplace. And I know salary negotiations, they're not a comfortable conversation for anyone. I don't know anyone who says, I love to negotiate, like I'm excited. Most people I know are nervous about it. But with a Black woman being paid 63 cents to every dollar paid to white men, we cannot afford to bypass this conversation. And I think a lot of times we just don't ask, and you don't ask, you don't receive. And so I would love for Ra and Sherry to kind of chime in on this. Ra, what's your best advice for negotiating your salary, especially considering some of the stereotypes that that weigh on our shoulders when you think about not wanting to come across as too aggressive? And what's your best negotiating tip?
I actually take my leaders through a real process. And it's drawn from the work of actually my husband. My husband is a phenomenal negotiator and wrote a book called Authentic Negotiating. And we use this work as part of our curriculum with our leaders. But there's a process of first really grounding in how you want to show up in the context of the negotiation. We call it your ground of being, right? And to your point, Courtney, because sometimes it can get very emotional, let's just tell the truth, especially if you've worked hard and you know you deserve it, and you have some indication or concern that they don't see all that you've done, right? You can almost start the conversation up here. Anybody know what I'm saying? So we actually take you through a process where we ground you emotionally, and we ask you to think about, who do you want to be in the negotiation and in the conversation? And how do you want to show up as your best self? And how do you want to be honoring of yourself, honoring of them, and honoring of the process? Because this isn't a one and done. It's not like, oh, we do a tough negotiation and then we don't have to see each other anymore. You may need to show up and be in communication with that person the next day. So, just being able to bring a different kind of context to the table becomes really, really important. The second thing we do is the purpose. Why is it important for you? What does this raise? What does this position? What does this opportunity mean for you personally? What does it mean in the context of your purpose, your vision, and the contribution that you want to make? And then we look at the intended results. And when we look at the intended results, we look at not just what's the number. The number is important, right? And can certainly be important. But we also look at, in what way are you going to grow as a leader through this process? Maybe it's you being in full voice in a way that you've never been in full voice before. Maybe it's an opportunity to build deeper relationships and allies and collaborators as you maybe invite other people to advocate with you, mentors, sponsors included, right? So there's all these other opportunities and ways to really evaluate all of what the opportunity can be available to you as you do that work. And then it's to stay grounded in the back and forth. And it's to be clear what's your ideal number and what will you not take a penny less. The a penny less conversation is tougher than you think it is. Because sometimes we think we know what our bottom line is, but we don't really know what our true bottom line is. And so being able to be in a process where you get to your true bottom line and you get to stand in your ideal, then you know what your range is. You know what the room is that you have to maneuver, and you know whether the other currencies that you want to bring into that process. And so that's just a kind of a quick primer of how we set people up. And then a lot of, just encouragement, like you can do it, stay grounded, no matter what happens, stay open, stay loving, stay compassionate for you and for them. And we've been able to help our leaders and entrepreneurs achieve incredible results through that process.
Would you like to add? What are your tips your best tips for negotiation?
I think that was amazing. What she just shared was definitely right. From an emotional standpoint, you definitely want to come into the conversation being grounded, and being, just making sure you're bringing a great, strong presence of confidence to the conversation. My advice is probably a little bit more practical in terms of resource tips, I suppose, when it comes to that. But before I mention the resources you can use, I want to also mention this. I think a lot of times when it comes to working, not entrepreneurs, that's a different type of negotiation, but when working in the workplace, I think a lot of times we forget that we have room to negotiate as an internal hire. And we don't talk about that enough, right? Where you do have room to negotiate as an internal hire. If you are in a position where you're being offered a position for promotion, or something, even if it's a big promotion or if it's small, whatever that is, there's still room to negotiate that salary. And that just because they're giving you a number doesn't mean that's the flat end number, right? There's still a range. Even as an internal hire, there still is a range for that position. Now, with that being said, internal or external hires, there is always a range for positions. I think sometimes we do not understand when we hear the word lowball, people being lowball for this. There is always a range for every position, okay? That range can be anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 of a salary band, or even higher depending on the role. There may be more room to negotiate specific things when you go to get to like a VP or C-suite level, but there's still room for negotiation in that piece. There are things that you can negotiate outside of just salary. You can negotiate, now we know working from home is something that everyone is doing. So we consider that being hybrid. Maybe you just go into the office 2 days a week and you work from home the rest of the week. You can also, so you can ask for flexibility. There's some places, depending on the position, you can negotiate for additional PTO or vacation time. Right? The one thing you cannot negotiate on is benefits, because that's a contractual thing between the employer and the provider. So you're unable to negotiate what you pay in terms of your benefits. A lot of people don't know that. So I'm just going to share these things because this gives them some insight as to why you're unable to do that. And, there's resources that you can go to find out what your market rate is, which is hugely important, okay? Because what someone gets paid for your role in New York City may not be what they get paid in Minneapolis, okay? So you have to understand your market, understand how you fit into the market when it comes to your education, your experience, any certifications you may have depending on your industry. So you want to make sure you understand that. You can go to salary.com. You can go to glassdoor.com. Glassdoor is a great resource to find out specifically how you can compare your role with what currently is as being reported within that company's profile. But also look at the 25 percentile and the 50 percentile, which is where people mostly fall, to make sure that your range is within that place. Now, a lot of times people do not know. A lot of companies don't do the diligence when it comes to equity. And what I mean by that is they do not go in and look at their salaries now. So someone who's been in the job for 10 years may have come in at 50,000, but now the economy has changed. They might be hiring for that same role, and the minimum starting rate now may be 60,000. So you have people with less experience coming in at a higher salary than the people who've been doing the job for 10 years. So a lot of times companies do not go in and do a check on their equity and bring those people who's been in those roles up to where now the people are the starting salaries are coming in at. So I'm just sharing this to say, do your homework and do not be afraid to speak up and say that you've done your research and this is what you have found, or that based on my education and experience and what I bring to the table and based on our market, or 50 percentile market is where I say your starting point should be. If you got at least anywhere between 7 to 10 years of experience, you can speak to that, and you do it with confidence. And like Ross said, you emotionally just come confident into the conversation and do your homework.
Can I add one thing? Sherry, this is so good. one little piece. Also, you know, we spend a lot of time really supporting our leaders, getting clear about contribution. And I learned this from a top woman at Citi, where she says, you know, when I come in, I don't just look at, you know, what were the mandates of the role. I look at my contribution to culture. Mm-hmm. I look at my contribution to team. I look at my contribution to mission. I look at my contribution to strategy, you know, and so I say that because there are so many places often, you know, and Sherry, and I know we talk about this all the time, right? Like where you don't really realize that you're contributing. Mm-hmm. And you take it sort of for granted, or you just assume everybody's doing what you're doing, or this is just kind of the way you do it. And I think our opportunity to really see all of our value is, you know, is huge in these moments.
Yeah, I just think that we should not be afraid to have the conversation. And I think externally it's expected to have the conversation. Recruiters and hiring managers are expecting, someone who is a true professional, they're expecting that candidate to counteroffer. And so they have the room. So you need to know that you should go in and say, well, I know they're going to expect me to counter this offer when they give it to me. Because more than likely, if they're a good recruiter, if they're a good hiring manager who knows the process, they're going to expect that. So they should be prepared to have that second number ready to go, because that person is going to ask for something. They should just need to be prepared. And you have some organizations who do a great job of it, and others who need a little work at it. But I think the most important thing is that when you are an internal hire, you also have to understand there is room to negotiate on that as well.
So many gems. So many. Stay grounded. Know your market value. Know that you can negotiate beyond just pay, which I think is super important, especially during this time, especially if you're a working parent and you need to negotiate, more PTO or more work from home days, especially when things get back to normal, whenever that will be and whatever normal will look like. So thank you all so much. And we're winding down on time. And I want to get to a few questions because we have some amazing questions coming in from the audience. But before we get there, I'd love for all of you all to weigh in on this and just fill in the blank, because I know that this past year has been a tough year for us all. And I think oftentimes we don't sit to reflect on what all we've accomplished, what we're most proud of. And so, Ra, I want to start with you. What are you most proud of? What are you most proud of in terms of what you've accomplished?
For me, the opening of this community called Information is like the top of the list. We need safe space. We need brave space. We need new space. We are in a moment of unprecedented opportunity in terms of our leadership, right? We've been talking about Ross Vero, but we certainly cannot forget our vice president. I mean, we just, we are here, y'all. And, we endeavor, my beloved partner, Deepa Parshothamam, and I endeavor to help us meet this moment in every possible way that we can. And so for me, this the opportunity to open this community and hold space for all of the amazing women who are, endeavoring to be served by this work is, I would say, for me, like number one. And then the only other thing I would add, because it's corollary, is that we've also developed a curriculum for allies, for white leaders and white executives who are trying to figure out how to actually create more welcoming environments for women of color. And so those two companion bodies of work right now are absolutely keeping me busy.
Awesome. And allyship is so important. So thank you for that work. Arena, what are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of family and maintaining a sense of mental health and wellness. I really am big on that as a parent of a child with special needs, 21 years in the game. Okay. I have really prided myself on making sure I stay well. And and that's what I want to give, as many professional and personal things. I always hold space. Me and my husband were on Black Love, y'all, Black Love. couch conversations, and we got to talk live with friends last night. And I always hold space when I'm in a public platform that whoever you are right now, whatever you're going through, almost 200 of you that are on, that we see you. We see you right now. You're connected. You're not by yourself, because it's important. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the fact that you have to stay well and you have to stay connected, and you do need to kind of speak through your masks to someone and give eye contact in the grocery store to stay connected. So I'm proud of the wellness that we have tried to employ for our children, for our partners, and for our external family, and for people that we meet on the internet, like people that we're connected to right now. So I think that's what I'm most proud of, and I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you for being here, each and every one of you, the panelists. I'm really proud that we get up every day and we get to breathe and do it again for the people that didn't get to come with us from 2020. So that's what I'm proud of.
Amazing. Sherry, what are you most proud of?
Goodness. Well, I think two things I'm proud of. You know, I started a career in HR many years ago without a college degree, and I was very successful in navigating human resources without it. Eventually, I did go back to get my education, but it wasn't until, you know, I had already been in the business for about, I don't know, 12 years or so. So, and I was able to navigate savvy through this. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the you know, being able to find a career and navigate through that without education that at the time was required. Now it's, you know, it's like, you know, they do the, 4 years or equivalent experience type of thing. But yeah, I'm proud of that. And there was one time in my career where I hired 336 people in 4 months. So yeah, it's a lot. But I'm also proud of the network that I have created, Black Career Women's Network, which came out of really several things, which one was my desire to look for a mentor and couldn't find one, or someone who would commit to mentoring myself. And then changing careers and moving from out of HR into career coaching. And then Black women kind of calling me just for my LinkedIn update and asking for career advice, and discovering that all this time during my journey, I wasn't by myself, that there were other women like me who were having experiences in the workplace just like myself. And I'm thinking the whole time I'm on this lonely island struggling, getting through this thing called career progression and ambition, and wasn't by myself. And so that desire came out of me wanting to do something and help. And that's how I started Black Career Women's Network, by that. And I think for me, what's most important, because, and I, no disrespect to the C-suite, love you guys, because we need you, right? And we need more sisters in the C-suite. But I know for sure is that they get a lot of support when it comes to, when they get to that level, they have a lot of support and resources, right? It's the middle women, it's the women who are entry level or mid-career who do not have that. And that's where we come in. That's really where our biggest audience is because it's those women from entry level to mid-career who are really looking for that additional support in navigation and being able to level up and break that glass ceiling. And so for me, this is my legacy. This is what I'm leaving behind for my family and my daughter. You know, I started this business when she was a teenager in high school. And I was like, why am I starting this now when she's a teenager and I need to be watching every move she makes? You know how that goes. But she was a good kid and we got through it together. And she was actually by my side the whole time. And what I started to realize is that she's watching me, right? So with her watching me do this, she's like, you know, it's keeping her from being distracted from doing other things. And so now that she's an adult, it has been a great experience for her too. So I say that to say is that, you know, find something. I have this quote that I share with a lot of the women in my network is, the life God gave you is larger than the life you've been living. And for me, that means that God gives us all special talents. He gives us special gifts. It's our job to discover what those are and use those to work in our purpose. And I think that we all have something special to offer. And all of our talents that God has given us, we should be in a job on the workplace that's going to exercise, where we're able to exercise and use those gifts and talents. So this is why I'm here.
Sherry, for the work that you do. Chloe, we're going to end with you. What are you most proud of?
The confidence that I've gained to trust my journey. I don't know where exactly it's going to take me, but I do know that I'm good on that journey, and that, you know, I can look back at all the things that I've already accomplished with gratitude. And so I think of 3 C's. I think of clarity of purpose, and we've talked about that. I feel like I'm getting more clarity around my purpose, because I really do believe that I'm so thankful to have a platform to make a difference in the lives of others. And to me, that is a purpose that I'll continue to evolve, and the good will continue to generate from more and more people. Compassion. So the other C, I've learned to have grace, not only for myself. So if I make mistakes and I fail, I could get up and keep going, because resilience is what matters, but also grace for others. Because during these times, everybody is facing some challenge and you don't know what challenge it is. So the ability to have compassion and grace for others. And finally, caring. And I would say that in a way that means caring for self. So I take the time to focus on caring for myself, making sure I take the time to do what nourishes me, if that's spending time with my family or working out, whatever that is, but also caring for others. And so I'm able to do those things with the clarity of purpose, a confidence, and a peace. And I'm thankful for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you to all of you for the amazing work that you're doing. Thank you for this dynamic conversation. Thank you, Fairygodboss, for putting this together. Thank you to all the panelists and to all the attendees who tuned in. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to get to questions as we're out of time, but I believe all of us are accessible on social media, and you can connect with us on LinkedIn. I think all of us will be happy to connect and network since we can't be in person. So thank you all so much again for tuning in. And again, thank you, Fairygodboss, for this amazing conversation.
Thank you again. I don't think that word's been said enough. Thank you to our excellent panelists and our wonderful moderator. All of you, we can't thank you enough for spending the last hour with us. The love is just exceeding from the chat right now, if you all have that open. This is a really, really great conversation, and we thank you all for being honest with your experiences and working together to figure out ways that we can push the needle in gender equality forward. So thank you again to everybody who tuned in for the past hour, taking the time out of your day to spend with us. Thank you to our wonderful sponsor, Accenture, for sponsoring today's conversation. We couldn't do it without you. We'll send the recording of this straight to your inbox later today, so be on the lookout for it, as well as contact info for all of our wonderful panelists and moderator. It's all on the event page where you first registered. And with that, I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and we'll catch you at the next webinar. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, ladies, so much.